Buonasera, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome everyone to our Voci della Natura series, where we have, in the first part of the year, we have reflected on the representation of nature and ecology in Italian arts with Professor Giovanni Aloi, a good friend of the Italian Cultural Institute, who today will be in conversation with Gabi Scardi, art historian, curator, professor and writer, whose main field of research focuses on the artistic practices intersecting visual art, anthropology, urban culture, and ecology. She investigates contemporary art, the public sphere, and collaborative artistic methodologies. She has collaborated over the years internationally with museums, institutions, curating exhibition and public projects. I would like to remember as well that Gabi Scardi has curated the restoration of Alberto Burri's Teatro Continuo. Since 2011, she has been the artistic director of NCTM L'Arte, a project by ADVANT Nctm. And since 2019, she has been president of NAHR Art Habitat Residency in Bergamo, a project we're going to talk for sure in a few moments. Among her most recent project, I would also like to mention Chiaralice Rizzi and Alessandro Laita, The Memory of the Air, and Emilio Fantini Risvegli, and that both of these projects have been supported by Italian Council, a program of the promotion of the contemporary Italian arts by the Director General of the Contemporary Creativity for the Italian Ministry of Culture. Welcome, Gabi. Thank you as well for being so patient and waiting for us until this late hour in Italy. And then welcome to Giovanni. Giovanni Aloi is an author, educator, and curator specializing in the representation of nature in art. He has published with Columbia University Press, Phaedon, MIT, Lawrence King, and Preston. He has contributed to BBC radio programs, worked at Whitechapel Art Gallery and Tate Galleries in London. In the USA, he's a correspondent for S Magazine and is a regular public speaker at the Art Institute of Chicago. Giovanni Aloi has curated also exhibitions in the US and Europe, and he currently teaches modern and contemporary art at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and Sotheby's Institute of Arts in New York and London. Then, as usual, I would like also to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and that it will soon be available for you on our YouTube channel. So welcome again, Gabi. Thank you, Giovanni, for being with us. I leave the floor to you for this conversation, and we'll see later for the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca, for having us here with us and Gabi. It's a great pleasure to have you here, Gabi, with us today, and I very much look forward to seeing your presentation, which is going to last roughly 20 minutes. Then we're going to have a discussion on the themes you're presenting, and then we can open the conversation to the attendees as well.
Oh. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for you who are there listening to this talk. I'm very glad to be here with you. Although this issue of art and ecology made me think a lot, and I had to decide what to do, because of course, when we think of ecology and the relation between art and nature, we go very, very back in time. And as an art historian, my temptation was, of course, to trace a kind of historical development of the concept of nature in visual art, within visual art, or even then I thought only within Italian visual art, and then I thought maybe contemporary Italian visual art, and then I understood that this would be absolutely impossible within 1 hour, and it would really take a long time. So this can be a very interesting issue for a course, but not for a talk. So I thought that at the same time there are so many things to say about this idea of ecology. Well, first of all, about myself. I come from art history. I'm a contemporary art curator, and my experience consists in working with artists in different contexts, meaning, well, in dialogue with museums, with institutions, of course, with non-profit spaces also, which are very important to me, and I think they are important in any artistic scene. And I think that art is a kind of window. It's a window. It's a very active pathway to rethink and to express, of course, contemporary reality beyond specific media. Any artists use today any media, and they are interested in any issue, because for them being artists means having a way of expression, having a voice, and they use it very often to say something, and to say it as loud as possible about the current situation, what is happening today. So this is the interesting thing of art, that it's a window. It helps you to look at the reality in a more focused way, in a broader way on one side, and in a very focused way on the other. And we live today in a very, very fragile world, and we are starting at last to be aware of this. And for this reason, ecology is one of the issues that we see more and more is growing in the attentions of the artists. But at the same time, I think that when we think about ecology, we can think about it in different ways. On one side, by choosing issues that require urgent attention, that by dealing with shared ecological concerns, and by posing questions that can be very radical. So in this case, ecology is an object of curating. On the other side, there is another possibility to consider, to adopt an ecological way in curating, and in looking at things. So an ecological attitude towards life. And again, I mean ecologically in the broader sense. Because, for instance, being having a responsible and ecological and sustainable attitude in curating requires rethinking curating as an organic and ecosystemic activity. Organic means that curating is a cultural and intellectual exploration, besides being a very practical work. It means organizing and so on. But everything starts with an intellectual exploration when it's done seriously, I mean. So it's necessarily in progress. It develops because it's like it's the mind. Yes, it's what happens in the mind of someone. It develops by continuity, not always in a linear way. It is linked to the fact of stressing a purpose and staying focused on something that is interesting, but it doesn't have to be a very specific. It can be a really a very multi-faced way of looking at things. Why I say this? Because while trying to think of on what to say, on what to tell, what to say in this with this talk, I understood that really ecological attitude in curating is something that has been with me always from the very beginning, not only because I was interested in ecological issues, but also because every step developed from the step before it. So a very organic, yes, development. So now back to ecology and back to curating. Curating comes from curare, which means to care. It's in Italian. This word is has the meaning of caring, but also treat. It's many things, and healing and. I think that when we think about environment today, the idea of taking care is very important. We have to start to take care of the environment instead of using it and exploiting it. We also if we think of the fragility and undervaluated environment we live in, and we think that we need more attention, and is somehow an attitude of apprehension for the subjects in state of need, which means nature, but which means also yeah, just subjects that are neglected. So environmental justice, for instance, but also thinking in terms of a very expanded notion of ecology, and on possible inclusive ways of living together with like living together beyond the sapiens focus. So now I come to what I really wanted to bring to you, that one of the issues that are important for me, at least in this moment, is the relation with animality, for instance. And that's why I would like to start with this. It's not so visually, maybe it's not the ideal, so strong, but this is the last issue of the most recent issue of a magazine I'm curating about animals, animality. It's about critical theories, theory about on related to animality, animals, because and I think this is important because human behavior towards animals made animals the most dispossessed, par excellence. We can think about Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa Luxemburg wrote a fantastic, it's a letter, but it's almost a short essay if we think about the treatment of an animal, something she could see from her window while she was in prison. And this is a metaphor of any kind of oppression and of exploitation we can imagine, and it's very clear from her words. So I think that this is an important issue, and this is something that I'm engaging with in this moment. And this is not the only thing we have. I'm very much involved in the activities of an association that has a base in northern Italy, in a really small village in the mountains close to Bergamo, Sottochiesa in Val Taleggio, and the residency is called NAHR. In fact, it happens between Sottochiesa and Los Angeles, so two very different realities. But here in NAHR, we invite artists or architects, people working in science, in different fields, scientific fields, to work together in an absolutely rural area, as you can see, where we have fields, we have woods, we have animals, but small numbers always. We have been dealing with rocks and stones, with grasses and pastures, with water, with woods. So really everything that is rural and what we call natural, but nature is a difficult word. Nature is a projection. So for instance, in Italy, we say, in Milano, in towns, in cities, we think all the time that we have we need more trees, while in the countryside, trees are a problem because the woods is coming back and taking the place that was the place of pastures before. So this is very very interesting, how the points of view can be different. Anyway, I think that when we think about ecology, we think about connectedness, coexistence, proximity, responsiveness, and interdependence. And this is something that we can really experience when we are in a place like Sottochiesa. It's very interesting to see how artists change their projects. As soon as they arrive there, things start to shift, and usually really the projects change a lot. This is one moment of the residency. This is another moment. As you see, the place is very simple. We spend most of the time outside if it doesn't rain, sometimes even if it rains. It's always a very interesting experience. So I see a very strong relation between different ways of acting, living, and even working. So organizing exhibitions and conceiving, first of all, exhibitions, and then organizing them in a sustainable way and in an ecological way, taking care of the artist, taking care of nature, taking care of objects. I think this is all part of thinking thinking and working in an ecological way. Anyway, I also worked a lot on, more specifically, on issues of ecology, of care. And for me, those two things are very close. And as I was saying, of animals. Maybe I could, oh, this is one of the works that was that originated in Sottochiesa. It's by an artist from Brazil, and he decided, he went around a little bit, and he decided to make some portraits, portraits not of the people in the valley, but of the animals. And the result is a series of real portraits of these cows. If you look at them, each one is different and they have their own personality. But this happened after he spent a lot of time. So it was really a process with the animals and with the shepherd, of course, also. And now I think this is an exhibition I curated some years ago. Maybe Giovanni, you want to, we can, I don't know, we can start a dialogue, or I can talk a little bit about this exhibition. This was the Greek pavilion in the Venice Biennale of some years ago. It was by an artist whose name is Maria Papadimitriou. And as I was thinking, as I was saying, curating is a long-term process. And for me, long-term relations are very important in curating. And Maria Papadimitriou is an artist I've been working with for more than 20 years now. She started working, we met because I invited her to work in South Italy. And it was a very nice and intense experience. She's a kind of bad girl, great artist. So this relation had among her results that we decided to propose a project for the Venice Biennale. There was a competition, the Greek state competition for the pavilion, Greek pavilion. We won the competition, and the project took the name of Why Look at Animals, Agrimica. Agrimica is a term that doesn't exist in Italian, and I think it doesn't exist in English also. it's a term for animals that we cannot tame. They will never be domestic. We do not eat them. We do not breed them to eat them. Still, we tend to kill them. Animals that are quite close to us. They are not exotic animals. So, for instance, wolves, bears, foxes, wild pigs, boars, wild goats. These are agrimica. This was the opening of the pavilion. This is the interior of the pavilion, and maybe it's a bit difficult to imagine, but this part doesn't exist usually, of course. This is an exact copy of a shop, an existing shop, a little shop that exists in the city of Volos, where Maria Papadimitriou teaches. She lives in Athens, but she goes very often, every week, to Volos to teach. And this shop was dismantled completely and transferred from Central Greece to where it was operating. So it was really a shop. It was a shop selling animal leather and hides, and this shop was dismantled completely and transferred inside the Greek pavilion in Venice. You will see the man you see here in this image. You see him in very small. Is the owner of the shop, sitting inside the shop while Maria was there, while the artist was there talking with him. The presentation of the relationship of humans to animals that we have inside this shop is quite peculiar. So this is the shop in Greece. So as you can see, it has been rebuilt exactly as it is. This is the man sitting inside his shop, a very old man. A very domestic situation, as you can see, and this is the shop. So here on the right, you have the little office where you have seen the man sitting, and all the rest is the actual shop.
Gabi, shall we talk about this piece since you're on it? And I wouldn't want to run out of time. And
yes.
Since we are already on one of the works that I think, one of your curatorial projects that's been, to me especially, I think it's been extremely formative. I remember going to the Venice Biennale in 2015 and approaching the Greek pavilion, which is in a beautiful spot, as I remember. It's quite secluded and it has a beautiful water feature right outside. What caught my attention was that there were tadpoles in the water feature, which I thought was very interesting already. There was something talking about nature that went beyond the sterile artistic environments that we are used to, even at the Biennale, where there's quite a bit of permeability between nature and the pavilions. I'm thinking of the Finnish pavilion that has trees cutting right through the structure. But then it was a big surprise when I walked inside the Greek pavilion to find the shop reconstructed and the hides. It was, to me, what was really interesting was the presence of animal hides and taxidermy mounts that we can actually see here in this beautiful image of the shop. And what you wanted to represent, or what you wanted to foreground, let's say, which is, to me, it's really in line with your idea of ecological thinking and how the idea of nature in itself is a construction that's very limited. It's now very obsolete. And in this ecology, when we use the word ecology, like you have done today and like you deploy in your curatorial practice, there is the important idea of connecting, right? Connecting different elements that actually are already connected. I feel like as curators, we often now in the context of ecologies, tease to the surface as much as we connect. And in this case, what I found really fascinating was your desire to connect the lives of these animals that, as you have explained, are impossible to domesticate, and yet that become part of domestic interiors and also part of realities. I'm thinking about cultural realities as well as financial realities in the catalog, which is really beautiful for Agrimica. There is a very careful exploration of the economic circumstances that made this shop viable, and also the recollection of the people that gather in the shop to spend time talking about the history of the country, their own histories. So how the shop works as an interface, a cultural, social interface for a number of dimensions, not just selling hides or trading in itself. And I found that really fascinating, especially in the context of animal studies, which is a subject you very well know and that you've been involved with for many years. This idea of empathy. So I think one of the interesting questions that I haven't had the opportunity to ask you yet about this specific installation is, how have you combined your curatorial threads in order to feel that this was worth presenting with Maria Papadimitriou? How did you think this is sending a message that is important, you know, to now? Why? How did you come about thinking that this is a message that can help ecological thinking as well as perhaps even the animals that we see in the space?
Well, in fact, in this specific work, it started really by a conversation around the table. I was telling her that I was interested in animals. She told me she had an idea. This idea started to develop. It became a project. And I saw so many things in this project because, in fact, there are many different concerns that spark from this project. First of all, we have to think that this is Volos. This man was very old. He was telling he also told it in the video that his business, when he started, he says in the video, he says that this precise word, he says, I was almost a slave. I was I was very young, five years old, when I started working in this shop selling leather and hides, and then his life developed in such a way that he could buy the shop, still working inside, and the business became a big important business, international business. It was selling all around the world for some years, and then slowly again this started to shrink, and when we started talking with Maria, it was 2013-14. Well, in that moment, Greece was almost out of Europe. Greece was at the edge of Europe, and the European Union was thinking whether to keep it inside or not. Like we could just throw away an entire country with all its inhabitants, citizens, from compagine, from the European Union, for instance. And so this made me think really about who is inside, who is outside. Animals, they live among us everywhere. At the same time, they are invisible and they have no rights. We can do with them whatever we want, with whatever we like. They have no rights. They are there. There are so many of them, but they are always on the edge. And exactly what we do with animals, we do in a different way, on a different scale, of course. We do what different social groups. There are groups that are in the center, and there are groups that are, or individuals that are on the edge. And the animals are the edge of the edge, the periphery of the margin of the margin. So, of course, what makes an artistic project important is the shape, the form. Art is in the shape that a concept takes. But I trusted Maria because we had a long history. I know her as an artist. I know she can be really strong and effective in her work. And I thought that this project had so many meanings, so many layers. It was so interesting. It was a way of speaking, yes, of animals, of society, of geopolitics, of all the tensions we were living, of how difficult coexistence is, and of another issue of violence, of course, that is behind all this. Violence is something so deep in society, and we are dealing with it all the time. And if we look at this photo or the others, everything in this shop is so domestic. There's something really familiar and sweet. And in the office, you see, there's this small table where two very old persons who are still going to the shop every day, but in fact the business doesn't work anymore. But still they sit there, they chat, they talk about the past, they drink something together. It's very domestic, and there is something very warm in this. At the same time, the relation with animals that you see everywhere, look at this, it is so cruel, so violent. And this is really the antinomy, the contrast that we have in our life and in our society all the time. So these kind of things, this is very specific, but these kind of things are the things that make a project important for me. That it's so layered, so deep. You can really read in this the thoughts about the human condition, about existence, about being a prey or a trophy or a hunter, and a foreign person. What does it mean to be foreigner? What does it mean to be a migrant? What does it mean to be someone living in the margins, or just not fit totally to the social behaviors, to the norms? So it's also about the norms and about how society is built on norms, and if you are not exactly in the norms, what happens? So yeah, this is what, yeah.
I thought it was a wonderful installation. Certainly my favorite of the whole Biennale, and still it remains one of my favorite. I think just in general, I use it with my students. It's very thought-provoking, and it's extremely layered and rich. To me, it kind of represents a little bit of the kind of turning point that animal studies needed at that point, where conversations have become a little bit too black and white, you know, like not quite, perhaps. There was a sense of jumping to conclusions far too quickly instead of staying with the problem, staying with the nuances of this very fraught human-animal relationship, as you have well explained. You know, there's all these contradictions that we experience daily, that we experience in our lives: empathy, caring, and at the same time sustenance, business, all coming together. And sometimes, like in the case of the shop that we see here, being part of the history of many people, but being part of the history of a country as well, being part of so much that is meaningful to people nonetheless.
Yes, yes. In fact, I think this is important in art. We can do it, and in good art, usually you have this complexity, and this is what makes it valuable. And also, I think this is what makes it durable. You can art is a bridge, and it bridges centuries. You can still feel emotion and feel that it concerns you. It speaks to you after centuries. You can and this is because it's complex and layered, and there's always another layer coming out. And also here in this project, there are so many layers, much more than we can.
It could just go on for hours, right? It's so rich, so rich.
Hundreds of details, really. For instance, the old man. This is just the old man had in his shop, because the shop in Venice is exactly the same. Every single piece that was in the real shop was in the second real shop in Venice. So you have this is like a corner of the desires, as you can see. And Maria asked him, why do you have a photo of Venice? And he said, well, you know, I've never been to Venice, and I always had a dream to go to Venice. So she decided it was really the case, a good idea to bring the shop to Venice, to try to bring the shop to Venice. And there are so many things like this, no? So it's what is the dream? It's also about being at Volos. Volos is it was at the time a small town where all the shops were closing. I mean, it was the worst possible crisis in Greece. Everything was closing. So from Volos, where everything was closing, and the shop itself was in fact closed. I mean, it didn't work anymore almost. To Venice, which is the super center of the art world and somehow of an elite, of course. So this also was a paradox, and this was really a ready-made, taken from there and brought. And this is what we can see behind the shop. So this is the hidden side, il rimosso. And this is not nice to see. Yeah, so we have this domestic side and then the behind.
Right, yeah.
And this is the one of the video. And this is here you can see the street where everything is really they
run
shut
down. Yeah.
Run down and everything is closed. And okay, and then I have some images. I thought maybe we can go on with another work by Maria Papadimitriou.
Sure, we only have a few minutes left, so
okay, so maybe you have questions, or
I don't know if any of the participants have questions that they want to bring forward to Gabi. If you do, please don't hesitate.
Hi, Gabi, thank you. I don't see questions for the audience, but I have one. And sometimes my job here is to ask naive questions, but it's extremely interesting. And I think it's a precious opportunity to have the possibility to talk to a curator like you. And I agree with Giovanni that it's stunning the complexity of Papadimitriou's installation and work for the Biennale. But it was very, I would like to ask you, how does your dialogue with the artists develop in order, because both, for example, with Papadimitriou, but also within the Nature Art and Habitat Residency. So what is the role you take in the conversation with the artist during the process that leads you to the creation of an installation?
I would like that. I would say, first of all, I work besides on the side of the artist together with him, but well, maybe was one step behind always. But I try to create platforms. This is the main thing, to create platforms where the artist can show his work, where the art can be generated, produced, where an art piece or an exhibition can be produced, and where it can meet a visitor, because it's like literature. A writer will write a book, write a novel, but then he needs an interlocutor. Also, the artist needs an interlocutor. But what is more important, I still believe, that the world needs art. Art as a symbol, art as a the object, or if it's an object or whatever it is, but where you have a synthesis, si cristallizza where you have a synthetic, you can have a synthetic view of something that is so complex and so difficult to grasp, like the reality. And the third thing, I'm a kind of mirror for the artist. So it's a dialogue, but we're always with the artist in the center and the work, the artwork in the center, and I try to make it happen. That's why I think that it's really taking care, curate from like the Italian curare is very meaningful in this sense.
Thank you for your explanation.
That's also a very interesting point, I think, on which to wrap up our conversation. Your observation on the way in which the word curare works in Italian in a way that curation in English doesn't quite capture that sense of empathy and taking care of, that it's beyond arranging, right? Beyond positioning objects in a space. There's something, there's an extra layer, a deeper dimension to the word in Italian that can or cannot become part of the process of curation itself.
Yes. And also you curate, so you curate the artists, of course, and the work of art and the exhibition, but also an institution needs this to be, so you really have to look at the activity as a whole and consider all the parts, all the segments, all the sides, and try to keep them together and create bridges between institutions, artists and institutions, and artists, art and the public, and provide keys of access to the work without being didactic, which is also you are always in the edge.
A big challenge, yes, you're right. Especially, that's one of the things I liked a lot about Agrikimika. It was the idea of that there was accessibility because there was a sensual engagement. I remember entering the space and it was so cinematic, and it was so there was an olfactory dimension, there was an engaging quality that made you want to know more and gain a better understanding of what was happening in that space, because it looked so different from all the other pavilions, and it looked so different from many other things I had seen in galleries around the world. And I think there's something important about engagement, because otherwise far too often in the art world we end up talking to each other and acknowledging that, yes, we've read the same books, we understand this. In order to understand this, you have to have read this book. And it becomes a kind of circular, self-congratulatory exercise that reinforces this notion of elitism. But I think one of the important ideas of ecological thinking and also curating in an ecological way is to include, right? Is to think about these networks of participation well beyond those who are already part of the institution or those that are already part of the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And
well,
also NAHR with bringing people to the countryside is also
Right.
is somehow, just to finish, it's the same.
Yes. Stepping out of the gallery space.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I think I would like it's time to wrap up this very interesting conversation. That I know that Gabi has some very interesting projects ongoing, and I hope there will be chances to talk about these later this year. And in talking about the medium, we talked about a curator today and about the curatorial work. So I invite you all to follow our next webinar on October 6th. And on October 6th, we will have the opportunity to talk on the other side of the mirror. So we will conversate with artist Andreko, who focuses his work on nature and ecology. And so therefore, it's going to be we will close the circle of this conversation. So thank you again, Gabi, for your patience, for being with us, and for sharing your work with all of us. Thank you, Giovanni, so much for your time and your contribution, always very, very meaningful to our series of lectures.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you to the Italian Institute of Culture in Chicago for making this possible. Bye, Gabi. Always a pleasure to see you.
Bye.
See you. Ciao.
Bye.